going forward, the debates, the discussions, and the amendments in such a manner that we discuss all these things together or we stagger the discussions. Because if you see a lot of emotions coming out there, some of them are about the things that are in policy, the things that are in administrative action, and some that are even just about legislation, but not about the constitution. And my fear is that if we don't separate these things, the public might go to the referendum with all these things in mind. Their decisions about the proposed constitutional amendments might be clouded by what is proposed in consequential legislation, by what is said about policy, and what is said about administrative action. And this will be dangerous. We might end up with a referendum result that is not well informed because it was clouded by these other things that have been tied to the amendments to the constitution. So this is a question civil society need to address very carefully and approach, because you can see the BBI, some participants are saying we have closed the door, we cannot discuss. I don't think that's the right way. They must be pushed to open the door. And I'm saying this because we have admitted in the introduction that 10 years is adequate time to look at some amendments. And it will be rather foolish for us, players in devolution, to stay away. And these people go on with this thing and they end up with the amendments that undermine devolution. We must find and push and get room to make contributions so that these things move on in a better way. And to just highlight my fears about people's mind being clouded and decisions being guided by the combining of these things, you need to look at the complaints coming from the health workers. They are complaining, they are saying they can oppose everything, but the reason is because the health commission they have been asking for has been placed in legislation, proposed amendments to the health legislation. If you look at the proposed amendments, some of them make sense, they are reasonable. And perhaps the problem is that why not put it in the constitution? And one may want to ask, those ones that are saying, oh, we don't want too many constitutional commissions. Some talk about cost. But the point is that even if you make the health commission a statutory body, you will still have to finance it. So why not just put it in the constitution if that is what they want? After all, we will finance, whether it is in the constitution or it is in statute, we will have to finance that commission. So we need to look at those things from that perspective and be careful to see how to move on so that we avoid some of these things and move on well. Now, if we fail to separate these discussions and activities, we are most likely to have some of these things declared unconstitutional on the ground that we are trying to subject enactment of ordinary legislation and formulation of policy to a referendum when the constitution does not require that. People can go to court and challenge this. So separation must be clearly made. Now, if we look at the constitutional amendment itself, bill, you will clearly see that there is provision in it about in section 67 of the amendment bill, there is provision about consequential legislation, even with a schedule 1 that sets out the legislation that will need to be enacted after enacting the amendments. That clearly implies that these are two separate things. and we therefore must deal with them separately. Although we may say one may read the proposed legislative amendments to inform or to understand why certain proposed constitutional amendments have been done, so that you can see whether it is good or not, or something of the sort. And we need to bear that in mind and avoid mixing things. And if you look at that section 67 subsection 2 of the bill, the constitutional amendment bill, it even confers on the Attorney General and the Law Reform Commission the responsibility of preparing the consequential legislations that will eventually be enacted after the constitution amendment has been done. That therefore suggests that by implication, one can see that we need to separate these things, and therefore look at the proposed legislative bills as merely first drafts of bills that will have to be developed and improved when we focus on that. And if you look at some of those bills, you will see some of them are not fully addressing the issues, and therefore they will need to be opened up. They cannot be said to be cast in stone and that they must be passed in that form. They will have to be discussed further by all participants to improve them after the amendments have been passed on the Constitution and so on. And that therefore must be noted. Now, so that finishes with my discussion on the process, and then it takes me to the content issues. And I need to point out that the BBI should be examined from the content perspective to identify, number one, proposed constitutional amendments that strengthen devolution, which we then can be able to support. Then proposed constitutional amendments that appear to undermine devolution and which we must challenge and see how they can be improved to avoid that. And then proposed new legislations and amendments that strengthen devolution, and proposed new legislations and amendment to legislations that undermine devolution, and we make contribution to improve them. And we must also be able to identify the missing constitution amendments that would have been included to improve devolution, so that if we engage the process, we can be able to point out that whereas what you have put in is good, there are other things missing that we need to add there that will further improve and strengthen devolution. We should also identify missing legislative provisions, either in the new proposed legislations or the proposed amended legislations, so that we can again also propose them for purposes of improving devolution. Now, if we go to the actual content issues, I want to begin with the financial matters, content issues regarding finance, and the proposed constitutional amendments touches on quite a number of financial issues. And I'll begin with the issue of the most recent audited accounts. The Constitutional Amendment Bill is bringing in amendments that appear to improve or strengthen devolution, in my view, when they say that when the division of revenue bill is being done, we can rely on the audited accounts presented by the Auditor General even before those accounts have been approved by Parliament. This, in my view, is good, because in the past we have suffered from the fact that the auditor presents these things in the National Assembly, but it takes very long to have them approved. So when we do division of revenue, many times we end up relying on very old accounts, which are several years back, when we should have been relying on more recent ones. And to me, that is an amendment that may need to be supported, because it is trying to address some of the problems the county governments have been suffering when it comes to division of revenue. Number two, there are amendments to the to Article 203 that deal with the criteria for revenue sharing. The bill has proposed to expand or to increase the criteria that is given under Article 203 by adding in a criteria that says that they need to eradicate corruption practices and wastage of public resources. Now, this is a very, very interesting criteria, but to some extent worrisome, because we need to know that while corruption is a problem for our country at both national and county level, historical experience shows that there have been perceptions that tend to make corruption look like a county issue and present national government as clean. And so my worry about this proposed criteria is that since the national government institutions are the ones that play a lot of role in a division of revenue, they are most likely to use it against county governments to say, oh, we are giving them money, but they just waste it in corruption, so we can reduce what we give them after all, forgetting the fact that a lot is lost in national government through corruption also. So this is still troublesome. I still don't know how to place it, but it is something we need to think about very, very carefully and see how to go about. Now, they have also proposed to introduce a criteria that says they need to ensure the attainment of the economic and social rights guaranteed under Article 43. This one I can emphatically say it's a good addition to the criteria, because in the past, many of you have heard me arguing that when you look at the intersection between assignment of the intersection between the Bill of Rights and the assignment of functions, we sometimes end up finding that certain rights then impose obligations, so that what may have looked like discretionary powers actually become obligations of the government. And I've always argued that Article 43 creates rights, many of which fall within the functional areas of the county governments, and therefore impose obligations on the county governments, yet that doesn't seem to be seriously taken into account when the division of revenue is being done. And so to my mind, inclusion of this as a specific criteria is going to be useful, because the Commission on Revenue Allocation, Parliament, and all other institutions will require to take into account the fact that the county governments have a large part of the functions that fall under the Article 43 rights, and therefore that makes it an obligation for them, and therefore entitles them to receive more money to ensure that they can be able to deliver those rights. Then there is a third one that talks about the need to ensure that the average amount of money allocated per person to a county with the highest allocation does not exceed 3 times the one for a county in a lowest in the lowest allocation. That one, of course, they are trying to bring in the issue of we look more at individuals, and you have had debates on that. I don't want to have any firm views on that, but you can think about it. So that Article 203, the criteria has been expanded in that manner. Then number 3 is the issue of the minimum share. The proposed constitution amendment is seeking to amend Article 203, sub-article 2, to increase the minimum share for the counties from 15% to 35%. And to my mind, that it's obvious for everybody that that is a good development. Then there is the proposal to introduce the Ward Development Fund. This one is troublesome, and I know most of us in civil society have been through the courts over these issues of CDF and Ward Development Fund, but they are proposing it, and in proposing it, they are saying these funds will be a 5% from the county funds, and they go to the wards. My big problem with this is that the BBI framers have failed to tell us explicitly that the Ward Development Fund should replace the Constituency Development Fund. So by failing to specifically outlaw CDF, it becomes obvious this is a sweetener that is being given to the MCAs to allow them to support the process. But at the end of the day, we will then end up with the CDF as well as the Ward Development Fund. And this will be too many funds, and looking at the cases that have been decided before, we will end up looking like we are introducing a third level or several other levels to share in the funds, and this will be a problem. But the bigger problem is the fact that although the proposed amendment says Parliament shall make legislation to provide for how this fund will be managed, chances are that it will be a legislation that will allow the MCAs to play a role. And yet we know that the courts have already ruled that issues of separation of powers come in when the legislators who are supposed to play the oversight role are also involved in the actual expenditure of funds voted. So that has a problem, and we may want to take it up. Then there is the question of the composition of the CRA. The amendments are proposing to reduce the numbers that are appointed by political parties on the basis of representation in the Senate from 5 to 2. And instead they have created, they have provided for 2 members appointed by governors and 1 member appointed by the professional body for accountants. Now, if you look at the 2 going to governors, you see, maybe it makes sense because the governors have a big stake, the county governments have a big stake in the work of the CRA, and therefore it would be reasonable that they also have some representation or an opportunity to choose people to sit in the CRA the way the National Assembly and or the way the parties in the National Assembly and in the Senate choose. So no strong views, but other members can have their own. Then there are amendments on the annual division of revenue, where they are seeking to they have deleted the Article 218 and introduced a new one that gives a lot of details and timelines on when the division of revenue should be done. And to me, that is good. They further introduce another section that addresses county allocation of revenue with the details and timelines on how Parliament, the two houses of Parliament should work. And I think that is a good thing. Then there is the role of budget in implementation of fundamental rights. There are also amendments to Article 220, which are introducing a requirement on the governments when they are doing budgets to give an explanation of previous and current proposed budget measures taken to give effect to the implementation of the rights under the rights as provided for by Article 21. To my mind, that is a good thing because it is forcing the government to focus their budgets towards implementing rights. And then there are amendments that seek to limit the national government when the national government by requiring it to base its estimates of expenditure and division of revenue on the Division of Revenue Act passed by Parliament. Now, this amendment is trying to restrict national government, and to my mind is reasonable, so that its expenditure is based on the division of revenue and not just left open, so that they can budget without basing on the division of revenue, while county governments are required to base their budgets on the division of revenue. And then the power of the national government in supplementary expenditure, there are also amendments that are seeking to limit it, so that they are forced to make sure that the amount is part of the national government's equitable share revenue determined by the act, and that the supplementary is focused on emergencies and not just on anything. To my mind, those are limitations on the national government, which means the national government has been sometimes using these provisions to expend monies in a wrong way, and to my mind, that is good. And then, of course, the county appropriation bills, they are saying they don't have to be based on the division of revenue that has been passed. And I think two reasons come in. Number one, sometimes the passing of the division of revenue delays, and therefore delays county governments in passing their bills, the appropriation bills. But number two, county governments do not only appropriate money they receive from the national share, they also appropriate money that they collect locally, and I think that amendment is reasonable. There is an amendment to Article 225 that empowers the minister to stop transfer of revenue to counties and other entities, and I have problems with that, because we have already complained about stoppage of transfer disguised as delay in releasing of funds, thereby avoiding the safeguards that the Constitution had put in place. And what is being attempted here, in my mind, to my mind, is not good. Now, then there are proposed amendments in the so-called Public Finance Management Act through what is called the Public Finance Amendment, Finance Laws Amendment Bill, where they are trying to introduce something called the County Assemblies Fund. You need to go to that, through that. There is section 24A of the Public Finance Management Act, which is being introduced. And it is worrisome, because this fund might appear to be inconsistent with the provisions of Article 207, which establishes a revenue fund for each county. If you look at this one that is being proposed in an act, is supposed to be a fund for all the county assemblies. Then from it, then the money is released to accounts of each county assembly. And you start wondering who will be managing this fund and so on. Of course, one would say the county assemblies have been complaining that sometimes the county executives don't give them money and so on. But if we are not careful, the MCAs will run riot with these funds when they are left with all this freedom, and we might run into problems. So we need to look at it a bit carefully and see how to go about it. Now, when it comes to functions, this is one of the most disappointing areas because I think before that, I need to mention that from the perspective of what is missing, we have previously complained that Article 225 envisages a treasury that is an independent entity and serves all the both levels of government. And one would have expected amendments that either to the Constitution or to the Public Finance Management Act that establish a treasury that is an independent organ instead of an instrumentality of national government, but that has not been done. So we may need to frame amendments that address that. But on functions, the only thing you see on functions is the transfer of the Nairobi functions to the national government. Yet we all have agreed that the functional assignment is one of the most difficult area of our constitution and devolution. And this should have been an opportunity for us to clarify functions. I have in the past talked about the need to create 3 lists of functions. This has not been done. We need to do it. We also have had 10 years to enable us to see whether some functions that we assigned to national government would be better done at the local, at the county level. And we have argued in the past that educational functions, the aspects of infrastructure in schools, both secondary and primary, would better be a county function, and then teachers, a curriculum, and other things remain to national government. No recommendations have been made about this, and we need to pursue it. So that is an issue we need to look at. Now, when we come to the content issues on structure of government, of county government and institutions that protect devolution, I need to point out that there are amendments proposed. Number 1, to require the governor candidates to nominate persons of the opposite gender as their running mates, and a lot of debate can come out on that, but it is there. Then there are amendments that do away with the nomination of women or the gender MCAs that will give us the required gender balance by political parties. Instead, they have now said they should be elected through a proportional representation on a party list, and to my mind, that is good. Then, of course, there is the issue of the Senate and its role. We would have expected a lot of amendments proposed on how to strengthen the Senate. This has not done, or has not been done. All they have done is to say that we expanded to 94 members, so that each county elects 2, 1 man, 1 woman, which is good in terms of gender balance. But the downside of that is that overall, we are expanding the legislature. We have expanded the Senate. We have expanded the National Assembly. and yet we should be trying to reduce them. I need to point out that recently Italy passed a referendum to reduce parliament. So in my view, while creating multi-member constituencies, electing one man and one woman is a good idea, it should be done in a context of reduced constituencies so that we can have a Senate of 94 members, but we should have a National Assembly of perhaps just 200 members, so that you have 100 constituencies, each electing 2 members. It gives you 200 plus 94 Senate. You have a House of just close to 300, and in my view, that would be a good idea. So we need to think through other amendments on the Senate on how to strengthen it, or amendments to legislation, perhaps to create a link. We have complained about the lack of link between the Senate as a representative of the counties and the county governments and the county governments. And we may need to create a link that may be tied to the participation requirements. If you look at Article 118, it requires Parliament to facilitate and facilitate participation and involvement. And we could interpret the obligation of the Senate to include consultation with the county governments, because they represent county governments, as part of their obligation to facilitate participation. And so we need amendments on that. And then finally, intergovernmental relations, there is a new proposed legislation called the National Economic and Social Council bill, which seeks to establish a National Economic and Social Council bill. I view that as a body that is supposed to be an intergovernmental body, especially when you look at the functions it is supposed to perform. And therefore, it means that the composition of that body should be kind of intergovernmental. But if you look at the composition they are proposing, all other members are national government, and only one member in a council of more than 10 members. Only one member is a representative of the county governments, and yet this council is supposed to address questions of national planning, and proper national planning must look at both the county plans and national plans. And to my mind, that is something that needs to be enhanced to make it strongly an intergovernmental body. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutaha Kangu.
Yes. Yes.
Unfortunately, with virtual, we can't clap. Maybe we can snap, because I think that based on the comments that are coming in the chats, a lot of people have appreciated what you've said. This is an excellent foundation, and we are getting requests to share the recording because I believe it's very loaded. You've shared so much, and we appreciate that. Because of time, I will only allow a couple of questions or quick reactions from any two participants, just so that we can honor our philosophy and belief on public participation. I can see Linton has clapped. Yes, you can use the claps online. So I have an opportunity for only 2 interventions, if any. People might even be overwhelmed and unable to engage at this stage. So if I don't get an indication of any questions, Dr. Mutaha, we might actually then be able to wind up. And I hadn't even prepared a question. I hadn't anticipated this scenario.
Suffice. I have a question. This is George.
Thank you, George.
Hand up. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Mutaha Kangu. I'm George Awala. I work with the Voluntary Service Overseas and also chair of the SDGs Kenya Forum. One of the questions I have now that seems like there was a recent meeting between some of the two protagonists around the BBI, the president and the deputy president. What difference do you think that makes? Does it mean that there's now opportunity for further dialogue and discussion? And how should civil society players prepare themselves to enable them to effectively influence the process? Because we know that it's had previous challenges, but now maybe there could be a window that's opening.
In my view, it is a wrong idea for anybody to say they have closed the door on such a fundamental issues. And whether or not the president met the deputy president, I think it is important that they consider a structured framework to take further input so that we don't go all the way and lose. So that means, therefore, that civil society ought to agitate to be given some room to make input. Of course, being tactful enough not to be sucked into the politics of the two sides, so that when you are even making very sensible contribution, people start pursuing you or labeling you as belonging to one group or another. We need to take an objective position and say, look, there are good things in these proposals, but there are also bad ones, and there are also those missing we need to add so that we make the document good for all of us. I think we need to push for that. If it means that we use that window to push for the discussion, I think we ought to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent intervention. Might there be another question to Dr.
Yes.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
Abraham here. Thanks, Doc. That was really detailed and insightful. What, in your opinion, is a problem we are trying to solve? BBI or no BBI? What problem from your reading? We all have different readings. Are we trying to solve as a country?
Now, this is a very tough one, but I want to say that as we have said in the past, Kenyans seem to have maneuvered their way and imposed certain standards on the elites, but the elites have not been comfortable with those standards and values, and using their role and offices in implementing the Constitution have been playing a rearguard to try and take back some of the values we put in the Constitution. And so where we are now, we should be able to say that it is yet another opportunity to try and seal the loopholes of those who have been playing rearguard, so that we get the Constitution properly implemented. Of course, loaded in all these, politicians always will play their very interests, and they look at things from their own interests and not the values. Just the other day, I was reading a very interesting book. They called the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and it seems to be saying that there are no values in politics. In fact, politics are just about being cunning, and they even say that might is right in politics, and therefore the ends justify the means. So we need to accept that reality, that while as Kenyans we may want to have some idea of values and idea of a good system of governance, the politicians, on the other hand, they don't care about values. So in trying to push what we think is good, we really need to know how to maneuver around the politicians. And that's why sometimes you see some normally say, okay, if it means giving a little of what they want so that they may allow what we want, you may have to do that. So these are some of the challenges we are facing. Thank you.
Dr. Tahakangu, I will
Yes.
ask, just share some of the comments for maybe your final wrap up.
Yes.
Some of these issues will be canvassed some more in the thematic groups, but we would treasure your view on these. So one is, there's a question here, which is a broad question. Will BBI help solve the problems bedeviling devolution? It's a broad question, I think, looking for a yes, kind of more clarity, maybe a less nuanced answer. There's also, will it solve the winner takes all problem? How come it hasn't addressed the financing of civic education? Is it taking away the safe space for women? And what are the financial implications? These are huge questions. Maybe you can just give us your thoughts as you give us your parting shot, kindly.
Now, maybe I begin with the space for women. In my view, we have been stuck with the issue of women for quite some time. And the BBI seems to be, to some extent, they are struggling with how do we meet this issue of women and so on. And that's why in the Senate, they have gone the long hawk of what some of us had proposed a few years ago, creation of multi-member constituents, these 2 members, a man and a woman, which then gives you 50-50. But of course, when it comes to the National Assembly, the method they are using may not give us 50-50 or even 1/3. So we still need to see how to go about it. But as I've pointed out, we must do this in the context of recognizing that Kenya cannot afford a huge parliament. And therefore, we need to be very, very firm, bold, and say, much as people may hold dearly to their constituencies, we may need to reduce the number of constituencies. After all, in this country, at one time, we used to have a parliament of 158 members, and that included 12 nominated members, which means that the constituencies were less than 150. So we need to take a bold move, reduce the constituencies, make them multi-member, 1 man, 1 woman, and we would have addressed the issue of women and so on. Now, number 2, you have talked about the issue of whether we can solve the problems of devolution. The answer is yes and no. If we don't push for their reopening so that we can put more in and rectify where there are problems, we might not be able to address the problems of devolution. They might continue. But if we can push for this, we would be able to. Now, secondly, I said at the beginning, if you read the BBI report, you will notice that they are complaining about the failure of government to pass policies on certain issues, or sometimes passing wrong policies. And that's why they have taken the route of giving what they call policy principles, or principles for formulation of public policy. And I said at the beginning that, but they have not told us what causes that. Why is it that we can do a constitution, we can do legislation, but those who are supposed to do policy fail to do that? If we don't identify that and address it, we still have a problem. But the truth of the matter is that the problem is the issue of vested interests. People understanding that we need policies of this kind, but because they have personal interests they want to protect, they want to continue with the old system. So that attitude issue will not be solved by laws. We have laws. We need something else to address the attitude issue, especially in the elites and how they do their things and how they exercise power when they're given that power. Number 3 is the question of whether we will solve the winner-take-all problem. Now, that one is still a problem in my view, because if you look at the expanded expanded executive that we are being given, you clearly see that if we go on the party lines, we will still have a winner take all, because the prime minister we have created is a prime minister who has to be appointed by the president. Even if you are to say he is to be elected by parliament, if the president has the president's party has a majority in parliament, then it is the one that will elect that deputy prime minister. So you will have a president from one party, a deputy president from that party, a prime minister from the same party, 2 deputy prime ministers also likely from that party. So the question is, there will still be a party that feels it has lost everything while another one has won everything. So the issue of winner take all is still a problem. And it will be worsened by the fact that we seem to be expanding the powers of the president, almost going back to the imperial presidency system, where the president appoints the deputy president, appoints a prime minister, appoints deputies, appoints ministers, and is not even required to know when it comes to appointment of principal secretaries. He now can actually appoint them without vetting by parliament, according to what the BBI is saying. And to my mind, that may just enhance the winner-take-all issue instead of solving it. Unless we are saying that when elections are coming, then we will be kind of killing all other parties, and you have everybody looking around for the party that is likely to win, and you all go there and negotiate within that party to be given some slot. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Mutaha Kangu, for that very illuminating presentation and for those excellent questions and very well answered. And I really can't summarize or attempt to, but I think the takeaway point for us is you're saying 10 years on, it is a good time for us to review the Constitution and look at what's not working. But we need to be ready to take bold decisions. Yeah. And some of those decisions touch on some of the issues that hurt Kenyans, or that Kenyans care about the most, like the cost of government, the size of government, because Kenyans are really unhappy about this. But what you're saying is that we need to be bold. If we are unhappy about it, we then have to say, reduce. And that means people have to give up something. You're also telling us that there is still a lot of confusion in the document, and that it is very important that the process, one, be opened up, and that issues be separated for clarity. You're then also telling us that the BBI doesn't fully deal with the issue of non-implementation, vested interest, and that's the elephant in the room for us. How do we deal with these interests? And then, of course, one of the big issues that has come to plague us, Kenyans have become aware, is this winner takes all. And you know, the presidential imperial presidency. And you're saying BBI actually is not dealing with that. It's giving more, going back to the more imperial form of presidency. So you've also touched on very many other positives, some negatives and gaps in this document as it stands. So we've talked about process, we've talked about substance, and we thank you because you're opening up our minds. As we end this session, our next session is to go into the groups, and there's going to be the opportunity, several people who joined, who registered, have already been assigned groups. Those who did not manage to register will have the opportunity to then register into their groups so that we can then transit from here into the groups. And I think we might get, once you're in your group, you'll then deal with a new moderator, and we will then be reconvening in this session at midday, around midday. So thank you once again, Dr. Mtahakangu. Thank you to all of you for staying with us. And I'd like the technical team to take over and help us transit into the breakout groups. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this group. I believe that you did select session number 6 that was looking at issues of gender, socioeconomic empowerment, and the BBI. My name is George Awala, and I am the country director for VSO Voluntary Service Overseas. We work in development through volunteers to support education, livelihoods, and also social accountability issues and enhance citizen voice. Within this session, we will have Dr. Rose Oloch of the SDGs Kenya Forum, who will be making a presentation on the BBI and the issues around gender and how that relates to the issue of SDGs that all of us know that the whole world made a commitment towards addressing. So is BBI as it is proposed helping us to make that progress? What are some of the challenges that are there in regards to implementing the current constitution? Are those challenges around gender and other related matters being addressed within the BBI? What are the big gaps? What are some of the issues that we need to think about? Because as we've just heard from the last talk by Dr. Mtahakangu, we saw that, yeah, there are many challenges. Some of them are structural, some of them are process related. Some have to do with the goodwill to implement the constitution as it is. So are these matters now addressed? There is the unfulfilled two-third gender principle that has been a thorn in the, I don't know which part of the bodies of the politicians or these elders of Zion, as we've heard them being called. Is the token appreciation of women leaders within the different forms of representational structures adequate? And what should we do? Because there's also a lot of litigation and judicial issues that are still pending in the courts around the implementation of the two-thirds gender rule. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Rose Oloch. We'll be making the representation. She's the project manager at SDGs Kenya Forum, where they're implementing a project that's supported by Bill and Melinda Gates to look deeply at how we can engender the issues of devolution and even supporting revenue allocation in an engendered way within 6 counties, but also inform national government. So it is my great pleasure to invite Rose. But maybe before we do that, we were expected to have a rapporteur, but I don't know who has been allocated to us to be the rapporteur. So I don't know, Kevin, who within the team has been allocated to this team.
Hi, George. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone who is in this session. So I'll be rapporteuring for this particular breakout session.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you very much, Kevin. Grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so without much further ado, I'd like to let Rose Oloch make the presentation. I hope you can be able to project it, and if possible, if the bandwidth allows, maybe also if we see your face as you're presenting, sometimes it makes the connection much better. And thank you, everyone. Put your questions maybe on the side chat if possible, or make a note of them. And then we give Rose about maybe 25 minutes, and then we can have a detailed discussion. Welcome, Rose. And thank you very much for agreeing to make the presentation.
Thank you, George. Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me. That's okay now? Are you able to see me?
Yes, I can see you now.
I've also shared my screen.
Okay, yeah, we've seen. So,
okay.
And yeah, fantastic.
Right. Okay, great. My name, as George has mentioned, is Rose Oluoch. I work with the SDG Kenya Forum as the program manager. We recently did an analysis of the BBI based on the fact that one of the programs that we are working on is looking at mainstreaming the SDG 5 targets into the county development plans, as well as into the various plans that happen at the county. So we wanted to really address the issue of, how is BBI, which actually is focusing a lot on the happenings at the county, as you have heard from Dr. Mutaha. How is it going to either enrich the SDGs, or perhaps what is it that we are losing when it comes to BBI? So I should be having on board Evelyn Komba, who is our gender lead. I don't know whether she has joined us. She was supposed to join us, as well as one of the consultants that helped to put together this analysis, Ken. If he hasn't joined us, I think he'll be joining us in a few minutes.
Sure.
All right, okay. So Eva is here, and we'll also be able to go through with me this presentation. So our presentation, actually, when we requested the consultant to do this, we wanted to have a comparison between, the Constitution and the BBI, as well as the SDG targets, looking at within the SDG 5 targets, what is it that we have that we gain within the Constitution? What is it that is even going to enrich it more within the BBI? And what are we losing when we say that we make the constitutional amendment? So we're going to, the presentation outline has a bit of a background on, what the consultancy was all about and where we are coming from. And then we'll be talking about some of the gains as well as the challenges when it comes to BBI, as well as the Constitution and SDG 5. What are the implications as well as the recommendations that are coming out of this analysis? So when we began thinking about this analysis, we thought that would look at it from the 9-point agenda of the BBI. And within the 9-point agenda, you know that there has been a couple of things that the BBI is looking at. It's looking at the issue of national ethos, responsibilities and rights, ethnic antagonism and competition, divisive elections, inclusivity, shared prosperity, corruption, devolution, safety and security. So what the events of March 2018, we all know, ended up leading to the handshake. And this is where the BBI, came from. And we are also saying that against this background, against this backdrop of BBI, where Kenya, we also have the implementation of 2030, the Kenya implementation of 2030. Yeah, and this, the Kenya vision of 2030 actually provides the foundation for realizing the Constitution, the 2010 Constitution. And one of the things that we have acknowledged and has been acknowledged across all over is that our Constitution is amongst the most progressive in Africa and even globally. It looks at issues of human rights, issues of inclusivity and marginalization. And this implementation of the Constitution, our Constitution, actually coincides with the 2030 agenda and the 17 goals. So what I'll take you through is to look at the gains when it comes to the Constitution of the 2010 Constitution, and then we'll look at the gains when it comes to BBI. So if you look at the SDG 5 targets, one of them is on ending all forms of discrimination, target 5.1, ending all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. And I was talking about SDG 5.1, ending all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere. If you look at where this is actually covered in, it's covered in Article 6, it's covered in Article 10, where we are talking about, Article 6, enforcement of all international conventions that Kenya has actually ratified. It's also covered in Article 10, where we are recognizing equality and non-discrimination as national values and principles of governance. It's also covered in Article 27, where it talks about equality and freedom from discrimination. Yeah, and we could go on and talk about what are some of those gains when we're talking about equality and freedom from discrimination. And we can discuss that as we move along. Then if you look at SDG 5.2, which talks about elimination of all forms of violence against all women and girls, both in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. Within the Constitution, is actually tackled under Article 29, where every person has the right to freedom, to security, which includes the right not to be subjected to any form of violence, either from the public or private sources. It's also covered in Article 45 of the Constitution that recognizes a natural and fundamental unit, the family as a natural and fundamental unit of our society. It also is covered under Article 31, where under issues of privacy, where every person has the right to privacy, which includes the privacy of their communication, infringement of their communication. So if we go along and look at SDG target 5.3, where we talk about elimination of all harmful practices, such as early and forced marriages and issues of female genital mutilation, we find that it is covered under Article 44 of the Constitution, which looks at issues of language and culture. It is also covered under Article 53 that talks about issues of rights for children to be protected from harmful practices, as well as Article 55, which also introduces and tackles the affirmative action issues. Then there's also the issue of harmful cultural practices and exploitation, which is actually also covered under Article 55D. Then if we go into looking at SDG 5.4 target, where we are talking about recognize and value unpaid care work and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, we find that is also covered in Articles 10.2. So then we go into looking at women's full and effective participation, which is target 5.5, and it is covered in so many of various articles within the Constitution. So where we are talking about ensuring women effective and full participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels. You see, there are so many articles, whether it is Article 97 under membership of parliament, whether it is Article 98, all those are covered under various articles. So what we can say is that when we are looking at actually the various targets within SDG 5, they are well tackled within the Constitution. So where is the problem? Actually, one of the few that are not actually tackled here is SDG 5 point article. The target 5.6, which talks about women and technology, which is not well addressed within the Constitution. So what are some of the, actually it's not Article 5.6, it's Article 5.8 or something. I'll check that again. So if you look at issues of access to reproductive and sexual and health rights, again, we have that covered in the Constitution. If you look at issues of giving women equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over land, then we still have articles which are talking about right to property, issues about equal parties in marriage, as well as land policy under Article 60. The same case, if you look at 5.9, target 5.9, we have all these articles within the Constitution that actually tackle the target 5.9 under issues of strengthening sound policies, legislations that promote gender equality, and the empowerment of all women at all levels. And we have all that under, for instance, the Article 56, where we are talking about issues of minorities and marginalized groups. We have 203.203, where it talks about equitable share and other and financial laws. We also have articles that are actually looking at issues of women, issues of youth, and issues of those people who are living with the persons with disabilities. So what are the challenges that come about with the implementation of the Constitution? Because if we clearly compare the SDG 5 vis-a-vis our Constitution, we are seeing most of the targets and indicators are clearly articulated within the Constitution. So the challenges that we have been having are actually threefold. We've had the challenge of the implementation, which can be structural challenges. We've had the challenges of legislation, as well as we all know the issues that we've had with, litigation. So when it comes to structural challenges, especially when it comes to issues of economic, one of the things that we've been really pushing for in the 6 counties that we are working in is actually to have a budget line, agenda budget line allocation at the county level. Because the last study we did that was looking at the budget allocation at the county level for gender issues, one of the things we found out is the gender department is one of the least funded. Yeah, and that funding that is there, most of it goes to administrative and not within programs. If you go into the county and talk to the various, when you go to different county departments, whether it's agriculture, whether it's health, and you find out, okay, what programs do you have on gender? It is not clearly articulated, and most of the time we ended up being sent back to the gender department, that's where the budget allocation for gender is. So one of the things that we have been now trying to advocate for at the county level is to have a gender budget line. And even now when we are talking about increase in county resources, can we actually advocate within those resources to have a specific gender budget line that will be looking at some of the gender issues that need to be tackled at the county level. Then, of course, when it comes to issues of legislation, we've had, different tussles, and I think even, the earlier presenter actually talked about some of those tussles that happen at the county executive vis-a-vis the county assemblies. And even now with the BBI and the various the various proposals which have been put to deal with this, we still feel that the issue of gender and budgetary allocations at the counties has still not been well tackled, and it's not going to resolve the problem that we currently have. Then we also have the nominated MCAs, which have been quite a challenge at the county level. We have spoken to a number of MCAs who they tell us, because of the virtue that they are not seen as presenting any electorates, that means that most of the time their voice is not heard at the county level. And when they speak, even at the assembly, most of what it doesn't get taken serious, because they, they are not seen like they're representing any electorates. And this is a big challenge for a lot of the nominated MCAs at the county. Now we see that BBI is trying to resolve this issue by removing the nominated seats of the MCAs, but at the same time we are saying that is not a solution. Yeah, so then of course we've had the challenges with litigation. We have seen the CJ's advisory. We have seen different organizations actually trying to deal with this issue of 2/3 gender rule, and we are still having a problem with that. So when it comes to the implementation of our current constitution and gender, this is a big challenge when so we are saying that we have a very good constitution that is actually trying to tackle the issue of gender in the country. The biggest challenge that we've been having is the implementation, how to implement that constitution, and the political will to actually get that implementation done. Now, some of the challenges that the BBI has identified, and these have also been addressed by the last presenter who was making the presentation, is that one of the challenges that the BBI has identified is on issues of, and I said about the 9 points agenda, yeah, that when it comes to the national ethics or ethos, we are seeing that the constitution somehow has seemed to deepen ethnic marginalization, and has not even been able to properly address the issues of marginalization and those who are left most behind. Again, it's not because the constitution does not address these issues. It's because of the challenge and the problem we have with the implementation. Sorry. Then the other issue that we have seen the BBI addressing as a challenge and trying to tackle is issues of responsibility and rights in terms of the survivors of violence, and especially like violence on issues of terrorism and all that. But what we are saying is that the survivors of violence that the BBI is actually talking about needs to be expanded to also include gender-based violence, because that is not included. Then of course there is the ethnic competition, which has actually deepened patriarchy and male dominance, and we all know how the patriarchy and male dominance in Kenya is, as well as the narrative that has come into play in the last maybe 10 years, whereby the girl child seems to be more empowered, or is seen to be more empowered than the male child. That is a negative narrative that actually is being is hoped to be actually addressed within the BBI. Then, of course, we've had the issues of divisive elections, and that has, also been addressed by the last presenter, where we are talking about, the winner takes all, as well as not women actually being elected into the positions, but being nominated, and therefore has created a lot of challenges because those nominated seats do not come with the power that needs to be in those seats. Other challenges that the BBI has identified is the issue of inclusivity. And we have seen that our society still remains highly unequal, with even inequalities, and now even during this COVID, during this pandemic, the inequalities have even increased. So what we are looking, what we saw as a positive is that the BBI is to a certain extent trying to look at the inclusivity and the inequalities in the country and how to actually address the issue of inequality. Then, of course, the issue of shared prosperity, where we are saying that a lot of marginalized groups, which include women, girls, youth, persons living with disabilities, as well as those who are left behind, farthest behind. We see in the society that the Constitution did not manage fully to tackle this, and therefore these marginalized groups still are left even further behind. Then, of course, the issue of corruption, where, this is a big issue in the country. And again, the issue of corruption has been addressed elsewhere, but at the same time, who is the most affected by corruption? It's women, it's girls, it's youth, it's persons with disability. Then the issue of devolution, where we have been, people have really been saying that the counties are under-resourced and therefore more money needs to go to the county. And we see that BBI is trying to solve this issue. Of course, the issue of safety and security and the issues of gender and sexual-based violence. We have seen the glaring statistics, especially at the current pandemic. We have seen that gender-based violence has continued to go up. And again, the BBI document is trying to see how to handle this. So what are some of the proposals that we've seen within the BBI, and how does that impact on Goal 5 on gender? One of the proposals is on rights and responsibilities. And this goes a long way, especially now that we are living in an age of open data. And our data can be infringed upon by anyone. So they are trying to look at the right to privacy, to actually include the issue of data and data protection, individual data protection, which is a good thing. Then it is also talking about addressing the issues of divisive elections. And here, when we did the analysis, we are saying that it is a mixed bag of good and bad. We're saying that the removal of the 47, county seats for women actually jeopardizes the affirmative action fund. Remember that the women rep have a fund in place. So we are asking, when we remove these seats of the women rep, what happens to that affirmative action fund? Yeah. Then the other thing that we are also asking is when the removal of the 12 seats at the National Assembly, how is that going to impact on the persons living with disabilities, as well as other minorities and youth? Because these seats have actually been an advantage currently because of seats which are actually special seats which are set aside for this group of people. Then when we are talking about the adding of the 70 seats, and I think this was actually also addressed by the presenter earlier on the issue of the 76. If we look at those 70 seats, we are not seeing those seats actually coming to women alone, because they're supposed to be mixed member representation. What does that mean? That those seats could either go to a woman or those seats could go to a man. At the same time, even if those all seats were supposed to go to women, then what happens to other marginalized groups and people who are living with disabilities? What happens to them? There's been a lot of talk about adding the women senator seats. And one of the things that has been said over and over again is that when it comes to resource allocation, the most important seat is at the National Assembly. So having these seats at the senator level for women, it is a good thing, but the resource decisions are actually made at the assembly. So women will continue losing on resources. Remember, we talked about the 47 women rep at the county and the affirmative action. We've also talked about the removal of the persons with disability seats. And now, when we are adding these seats at the county level, the women are actually losing when it comes to, issues of being part of the voice that makes decisions when it comes to resource allocation. Then the other thing we noted with the BBI is that it is silent on people living with disabilities. And I think this is an issue that has been raised by a lot of different groups on the fact that it's silent on people living with disability. It's also silent on ex-officio members and independent candidates. Now, when it comes to addressing the issue of inclusivity, we see that BBI is implying that it is now solving the issue of two-thirds gender rule. And we had even Dr. Kangu talking a lot about, for the last 10 years, the country has struggled with how to solve the issue of two-thirds gender rule. And the BBI comes in to try to solve that issue. But we have also seen that when it comes to the top leadership, this has been questioned over and over again, that there is inconsistency in applying the two-thirds gender rule. It is being applied at the county level, but it is not being applied at the national level. And the question we are asking is, why can it not be applied at the national level, whereby we have a president who could be a man or could be a woman, and the deputy to be a woman, a man, and vice versa, even when it comes to all the other positions at the national level. There are several BBI other proposals within BBI that actually impact on SDG 5. There is the issue of shared prosperity, where, of course, we've seen that the Youth Commission is one of the things that the development or the bringing on board a youth commission, and that has also been questioned a lot, because the question is what is going to change by actually having a youth commission, and yet already we have other commissions that have really not impacted on the challenges that we have with our youth today. Of course, there has been the issue of talking about the loan grace periods for youth, and a lot of discussion has also, come on board on that. First of all, not a lot of youth are even able at the moment to get even small loans to start their businesses. So how is this actually helping the youth? We've talked a bit about the issues of devolution, and Dr. Kangu talked on that, so I'll leave that. Of course, the safety and security, I've mentioned issues of data protection, also issues of gender and sexual violence, as well as having a victim fund, which I was also suggesting that that victim fund should actually include, issues of, GBV. What are some of the recommendations that are coming out of this report? So we are saying in under SDG 5 target 5.1, 0.2, and 0.3, which addresses issues of discrimination and harmful practices, we are actually calling for beneficiaries of the victims, like I've said, to expand in order to include ethnic as well as gender-based violence, and not just terrorist violence. Also, we are talking about the cybercrime and cyber security laws. Also, generate a costing study for prioritizing how to combat GBV. At the same time, allow for more discussion at the county level on rites of passage for male and female that conforms to the Constitution. And that has been addressed within the BBI, but we are saying that this needs to actually become a discussion, open public discussion that can happen at the county level. So in line with SDG target 5.4, which addresses issues of unpaid care, we are saying that there has to be a policy and legislative measure towards ensuring shared parental responsibilities. Target 5.5 on political participation. One of the things that we are suggesting over here is the engagement of political parties committee to support the office of registrar to ensure enforcement and compliance, because you remember one of the things that has been suggested in the BBI is that the political parties have to comply with ensuring that women, the two-third gender rule within the political party is, enforced. And here we are saying we need this to actually comply with and enforced. Then we are saying that we need to galvanize efforts among civil society and women leaders to introduce constitutional or legislative measures, reinforcing the 70 positions for women, youth, and persons living with disabilities. And then we need to voice the need for two-third gender rule to apply in other elective bodies and not just the bodies that have actually been addressed within the BBI. We are also saying in line with target 5.7, where we are talking about addressing equal access to economic resources, we need to mobilize civil society organizations and women groups to ring fence around the the national government affirmative action funds, so that that fund is not taken away from women. And target 5.8 issues of technology. We are also recommending that there has to be innovative efforts that enhance gender protection. At the same time, when we are talking about SDG 5.9, we are saying that we need to mobilize civil society and women rights organization to, again, I've already talked about the affirmative, to ring fence around affirmative funds, sensitize county government on gender responsive budgeting and social accountability mechanism, capacity building of ward representatives to apply gender principles actually to public policy and legislation. And even when we are talking about the ward fund that is going to be put in place to ensure that if that ward fund comes into play, even women are considered within that ward fund. So I'm going to give Eva, if she's still with us, maybe, or the consultant, maybe a few minutes to add whatever that I've not maybe talked about or left out. Eva?
Thank you. Thank you. This is Kenneth Odari. I think you've covered, yes, I'm just saying that Rose has covered much of what we intended to cover with this particular presentation. I think I look forward to any questions that may arise from this particular presentation.
Okay, so thank you, Ken. How about Eva? Any thoughts or reflections before we wind up this bit and then go into a discussion? Okay, so thank you very much, Rose. I think Rose deserves a hand of applause. You can go to the reactions bit there and you can do a clap. Zoom provides for that function. So we really appreciate the presentation by Dr. Rose Oluoch of SDGs Kenya Forum. And thank you very much for the analysis. We really value the work that was done by Kenneth. Also, just to consolidate this information and enable us to clearly see what are the gains that we've made with the Constitution as it is. Definitely, there's really good progress in a variety of areas around the SDG 5, but there are still structural challenges. There's also the issue of marginalization that hasn't been addressed fully, issues around rights of women and their responsibilities. There are still gaps. And some of these things BBI purports to solve or resolve. There's also the narrative around the gains of the girl child at the expense of the boy child, which is an incorrect narrative based on the presentation that we've had and what has been shared. Representation of women, I think this has been a big thorn in the flesh. And yeah, there are some recommendations which both in Rose's presentation and Dr. Kangu's presentation seem to still, yeah, not fully maybe address the issues of where the decisions are being made. I think inclusivity is still an issue, a big challenge. Shared prosperity, the Constitution as it is, has created new opportunities, spaces for land, rights in marriage, etc. But still, we are not seeing proper inclusion, especially for very left behind groups, marginalized groups, women in different circumstances, especially women who have disabilities or who find themselves in very marginalized situations. And then there's also the bit about, what kind of support should be there? Affirmative action funds, should we advocate for that? How will they be managed? Will they be effective and enable women more? So I'll open up the floor for discussions a bit. If you have any questions or comments you want to make, because in the room we also have people who are working within the space of gender, SDG number 5, you may have some opinions about what you've heard. I think this is a really great opportunity. And we have Rose and Eva and also Kennedy, the consultant who worked on this, who can respond, but you can also just have a discussion which Kevin can capture and can be presented at the plenary. So open to questions, let me know. You can raise your hand and then you can use the raise your hand button. So go to chat, participants, click there, and then there will be something that enables you to raise your hand. If not, you can also put on your camera and then raise your hand. I'll try to see if I can see you. Okay, so Violet Ombaka says, yeah, thanks Rose for the breakdown of your presentation. Please share the presentation at the end, yeah. So I trust that all these presentations will be shared through TISA, who are consolidating everything in regards to this. So if you have attended and you have your email, we'll be able to share with you the presentation. Yeah. So maybe I'm not seeing any specific questions, or am I missing someone who's raised their hands? Maybe then you just unmute and talk.
Yes, I think
Okay.
Willis has raised his hands.
Okay, Willis. Yeah, so go ahead. Willis Sumba.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, George. It's not specifically a question, but my observation, and it's like the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
So because I try to imagine and think the gains the Constitution of Kenya 2010 had placed on the marginalized, the women, the PWDs, and the youths. So vis-a-vis the proposals in the BBI, and trying to follow up the question Dr. Rugo had asked during the first plenary. So what might be the key challenge that we are fighting with? Is it the challenge on implementation of these particular proposals and the gains the Constitution of Kenya 2010 had envisioned? Or it's like, what do we need to do specifically? Is it to ensure that implementation of these things are done, or just putting things on paper? So
okay.
that's my struggle I'm trying to strike on.
Beautiful question. So what is it that we should do? Okay, then Nekesa Julian also says, Nekesa, would you want to ask your question? Unmute and then ask it.
Okay, good morning.
Morning.
My question is, how can we ensure that we have gender parity in our counties and at the national level, given that we might be having some communities with more than one gender in population, so that we can achieve the two-third gender rule?
Okay. So I don't know, Rose and Eva, do you want to take those two questions first? One, what must we do? Is it issues of implementation? And then the bit about populations with more than one gender.
Thank you, George. I think I'll try, and then I'll give Ken and Eva, as well as I see Mercy from crew here, because I know they've also been really working with the two-thirds gender rule issues, so she could also respond. If you remember what Dr. Kangu was talking about, that, and I have also insinuated, is that our constitution, the biggest issue have been under financial issues as well as legislative issues. And we are seeing that even with the BBI, those are the two main issues that they are trying to address, financial as well as legislation. And these are still the big, challenges that we are having when it comes to, addressing, gender equity and equality issues in the country. So how are we moving forward? What is it that needs to be done? First of all, we are saying, yes, the Constitution, and it's important for us to really protect our Constitution, because the Constitution actually, was clearly supporting a lot of issues on equity and equality issues. It's the biggest challenge we have is the implementation. The biggest challenge we have is on our legislation. So, and then because this train has already taken off and we can't stop it, one of the things that we are saying is that without necessarily making this become a political discussion, it's good for us to sit down in a sober way and look at what are the gains for women within the BBI. Okay, one of the gains we are seeing is that, at the county level, there are several gains in terms of having the enforcement of either having a woman or a male governor in the counties. That is a gain, but we are also losing, and we have seen. Secondly, we've also seen that, we may gain, but what about those who are left behind most, those who are marginalized? How do we deal with that? So I think it's really to continue having a sober conversation with this document and ensuring that we get it to the right people, those who are actually the people who wrote this BBI to ensure that some of our recommendations that we are making will actually be considered. That is something that is we feel that will help if we can actually get these documents to the BBI writers. Over to you, Kenneth. And
Kenneth or Eva, please. There's the other question that's still unanswered, the one on gender. If you have more than, yeah.
Perhaps I'll just, because of the sort of like train of thought, and just say that with respect to issues of marginalization, I don't think we'll get to a point where we'll be able to say that, yes, now we sorted out marginalization. Marginalization is something that will continue being with us. We need to be alive to it. Like, for instance, even as we are talking right now, issues around data, the new fourth industrial revolution is already creating a new aspect around marginalization. So it's not something that we'll be able to completely do away with. We'll always be trying to ensure that we try and sort of like reduce the effect. I think from that perspective, there's no one bullet to say that, yes, with this we sorted out marginalization. Issues around how we can sort out gender parity. I'll give you a recent example of a process I've been involved in Zambia, where they had the Bill 10, which had almost a similar background to issues of BBI, whereby the ruling party there was intending to bring in a number of amendments, and some of them included ensuring that more women would be elected through proportional representation. After a lot of canvassing, I think 2 weeks ago, the bill was defeated in Parliament. Of course, largely because the people who opposed it felt like the government was using the plight of women to sort of like ride the wave, and so throw something to women, but at the back of it, they had more dangerous cards around debt and around loans and that kind of stuff. So they didn't fall out. But with respect to Kenya, I think I want to paraphrase and with what Maraga said. There can be no gain without pain. So we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to lose in order to gain? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kenneth. Eva, do you have any thoughts, reflections on this? We still had the question that was raised about the gender, because I mean,
George,
yeah.
George, I had mentioned that maybe we also give Mercy from Crew an opportunity to discuss this, because they've also been involved a lot with issues of gender parity.
Okay, thank you. So Mercy, you have the stage.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Rose. I think Kevin, is it called Kevin? Kevin has really ended it well, that there must be pain for us to gain. But for us as actors on SDG, I think the BBI puts us in a very, precarious position, so to speak, because we do not now know whether to call for the implementation of our constitution or whether to take this opportunity and try to, ask for more. What we know is that both the National Assembly and the Senate, as currently constituted, have not been able to meet the 2/3 gender rule. So for us, I think, is to take opportunity and believe that this is a negotiated process, that we see ways in which we can ensure that the mechanisms really for achieving the 2/3 gender rule are enacted. And so the proposal in BBI for the Senate, I think, is welcomed. I disagree with Mutaha when he says that we have to look at that in the context of, increasing the wage bill, increasing our expenditure. For me, I don't think, and I don't support these notions that the women of Kenya will always be the ones to bear the, the burden of cost, all the time. When we seek to ensure parity, when we seek to ensure representation for women, and when we talk about women, we mean women with disability, young women. There is always this question of expenditure and, you know, ballooning of the wage bill, which is not I think it's not good. So that proposal by the BBI is a good proposal to have one woman, one man elected for the Senate. And also the idea that we must maintain the equality of vote within a Senate that can be the only solution, because then the one woman, say if one woman is from Nandi County and a man is from Nandi County, then we sort of have addressed the issue of the equality of vote. In the National Assembly, we've not met this. The BBI proposals also, as currently as they are, also do not meet the two-thirds, or they do not ensure the inclusivity and representation of women. So for us, what we are doing as the Center for Rights, Education and Awareness is try to ensure that those proposals that the political class is putting on the table are proposals that might help us resolve the problems that we are currently facing. So when you look at the BBI proposals, to some extent, they try to address issues. It's only on inclusion and representation of women that, you know, we seem to be having, you know, problems with the BBI, especially in the National Assembly, and also the executive. The executive has proposed, they do not provide us with a mechanism that will ensure that the president, the vice president, those prime ministers that are being proposed, they do not tell us how they will ensure that of all those positions being proposed, that we'll have inclusivity in that. And that applies also to the cabinet positions, to the diplomatic corps positions that are being, to the principal secretary positions. All these are executive positions, and all this must adhere to our constitution. So that's my take, and my take to that question around, is this a problem of implementation? Yes, it's a problem of implementation, but we also know how decisions in this country are made. The political class has already taken off, as Rose said, and the balance of power seems to be favoring them. So I think it is incumbent upon us as actors on SDG 5 to ensure that we maximize on this opportunity, and to ensure that whatever the political class is trying to put on the table is favorable to the women. Allow me just to mention some of the gains that I didn't hear Rose making. There is the proposal to have the Council of Governors nominating 2 nominees to the Commission for Revenue Allocation. And one of these nominees by the COG must be a woman. I think that's a good proposal by BBI, because then the county revenue, the CRA is in charge of generating the revenue, county revenue formula, which is important for us as women. And then there is the proposal to have an opposite gender rule for governor and deputy governor. I think those are good gains for the women of this country. And then there's a proposal on political parties. Now in the BBI, there's a proposal that political parties are supposed to provide to the IEBC a list of candidates that is 2/3 gender compliant. So of the 300 seats that are being proposed, all political parties must ensure that 120 of their candidates are women. I think that's a good thing, because then it makes women vie for these positions with some margins for that, that perhaps they can win these seats. And then we have the establishment of the Health Service Commission, whereas it's as proposed now, it's not a constitutional commission. I think we all know that 70% of health workers in this country are women, and the management of health workers has been very poor, has been below par. So I think that the establishment of that Health Service Council is good. We can and should push for an independent commission, but we should not lose sight of the opportunity that presents to the women of this country. We have now protection against sexual and gender-based violence within the BBI proposal. Now that will be an aggravated assault. So it's good, especially for election violence. That's a good gain for the women of this country, and that's a gain that we should continue to pursue and ensure that it is completely and it's guaranteed within those proposals. So I think in a nutshell, those are my, reflections on this discussion. It's good. What I wanted to ask, and what, we continue to grapple with as the Center for Rights Education and Awareness is, so this is the situation. We are in this position. How do we move forward? How do we ensure that these proposals that we are making to the BBI are safeguarded, are included in the report? I think that's what us as the actors in this sector, we should really be trying to ensure. I hear now the religious people have really established themselves within the discussions. How then can we, as the actors within this sector, ensure that also us, we create some sort of political cost that the political class cannot and should not ignore us. Thank you very much, George. Over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mercy, and thank you for bringing in those points around the Health Service Commission, and also just the issue of political parties being compelled to present specific numbers to comply with the 2/3 gender rule. Really, thank you for that. For those comments that you've made. And maybe the question that you leave us with is a similar question to what I was grappling with, and even what I asked Dr. Kangu is, so the window seems to be opening. How do we position, how do we ensure that what you are discussing here finds its space in the BBI room? Because there are some people who are, I think I can see a comment around being in the menu, but not being part of the agenda. So how do you ensure that we really are part of that agenda, and we are well organized, like the religious groups and even the health fraternity, who have come out very strong, and you can really see, maybe similar to what happened during the Constitution of Kenya 2010 preparation, where the teachers stood on their ground, and you can see the TSC was entrenched, and it's part of that constitution, and you can't remove it. So how do we ensure that that happens? Fantastic. Any thoughts? Willis, I can see your hand is up there. Essie Olang, do you have any comments? So let's talk to Willis first, and then maybe you can go to someone else.
Thank you, George.
There's also Nekesa.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Mercy, for that very insightful input. My take on this is we are again supposed to be very precautious. As Africans, I think it's critical as we discuss these gender issues, as we discuss the SDG 5. We also need to be alive to the fact that we need to build institutions rather than thinking of building individuals. So if we take in the context that we are building strong institutions, gender institutions, than thinking or going with that thinking that we are building or discussing about personalities and individuals, it will be so great for us. And then we advocate again for more spaces for like institutions that tackle or deals with gender issues than just a number of people, that we just need a number of 18 women, we need 100 women to be here. So like creating a space of institution that again be able to argue and build the capacities and forward or front the issues that talks about gender. Taking from what Mercy was bringing on board, if you have like institutions like Health Commission or Health Council, like the Youth Commission, those are again strong institutions that will be able to tackle and then be able to address gender issues. And this is for prosperity and sustainability. So thank you.
Very good point. And maybe within that context, I'm wondering, what are your reflections of the current, or maybe the developments around the Gender and Equality Commission? How is that tackled under the BBI? Because we still need strong institutions to really push the gender agenda. Mercy or Rose, one of you.
George, I think first I wanted to maybe react a bit on the issue of the political parties. We also tackled it within the analysis that we did. What we felt was that it wasn't going far enough to protect women. It's one thing to ensure that there is 2/3 gender compliance within the political parties. But when it comes to election, remember the electorate in Kenya tend to lean more patriarchal. So there is a need to have more civic education. Then we also talked about the political, around elections, we normally tend to see a lot of political violence, specifically women. And that makes a lot of women not actually vie for these political seats. So if we are talking about that, you know, we don't have the nominated seats now, and we are making, you know, everyone go into elective positions, then we also need to ensure that women are protected against political violence, because that's the only way that will get more women to actually position themselves for these elected posts. Then how do we ensure that you know, these proposals are actually included in the current BBI you know, BBI report? And right now we know that the two principles are talking about signatures, ensuring everyone, you know, walks the talk and all that. But for us, we keep thinking as the forum that all is not lost. And Mercy has said a lot that, yes, there's a bit of gain for women at the within the BBI. And is to ensure that, you know, we all get involved in this process and not necessarily just leave it to the political parties and to our political leaders. The civil society needs to begin having a voice in this process. When they come for the signatures, I think even before that, we need to begin conducting civic education, because this is one area that is not happening. There's a lot of people, as even Dr. Kungu said earlier, that this document is so big, and a lot of people have not read it because, you know, of the voluminous report that it is. So it is up to us as civil society to really just take this document now and take it to the people and break it down to them, so that they're able to see what are the gains and what are the losses, and especially what are the gains and what are the losses for women.
Thanks, Rose. Yeah, appreciated. Mercy?
Yeah, just I think on institutional frameworks to safeguard gender equality, it is important. And we are seeing, you know, initially there were discussions in the country of merging the Kenya National Human Rights with the National Gender Equality. At least in the BBI report now, we can breathe because the National Gender Equality has not been touched in any way. So for us, we think, you know, we still have that, you know, institution that then will check on gender equality. They've not been performing well. So we need more work there to ensure that the National Gender Equality Commission performs its function.
And maybe when you're still at that, Mercy, we've seen a lot of wastage sometimes, or even corruption in some of these institutions, and maybe not necessarily speaking about the Gender Commission itself, but how do we also protect ourselves from the wastage and the corruption and misuse of public offices that is inherent? I mean, we've seen what happened with the Youth Fund over the last 5-10 years. It's been really a mess.
Yeah. Oh, George, that's a difficult question, because that, you know, the problem there is a problem of values, and all of us seem to be having this problem, you know, both the people in leadership, so, and also sort of our accountability mechanisms are sort of weak. We do not have ways in which to hold people in, you know, that people that are in charge to account. So perhaps we need to have proposals of ensuring that we strengthen our accountability mechanisms, including ensuring that these offices are as transparent as possible. So for me, the solution there should be with civic education, that the citizenry are capacitated to be able to hold their leaders to account, and to also ensure that we have, second is to ensure that we have those accountability structures, you know, that are very clear, very outlined, and that are very effective to ensure that issues of corruption are addressed. So those will be my top of the head suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's somebody who's also talking about provisions for opposite gender in the executive and other things. So what proposals would we be making on that? And then can we also...
Yeah, I think the Constitution has set the basis. The basis is 2/3, that not more than 2/3 of any elective or appointive body should be of one gender. That's the, you know, the basis for this country, and it's upon that basis that every other thing should fall. So for executive is that whatever that executive will be, the minimum is that 1/3 should be of one gender. That's the basis. So any mechanisms I think that we should be proposing should be those that adhere to Article 27 of our Constitution, Article 81B of our Constitution. I think to that extent, the Constitution has at least given us some framework on which we can approach these issues.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Another question coming from Willis is, as actors in the room, how do we demand for the actualization of these gains or these recommendations? How do we ensure that they see the light of day? And I think that's a big question.
Yeah, is that addressed to me?
Not necessarily to Mercy, but I think it's to everyone who's here. You came in here because you had an interest and you wanted to contribute, I believe. So any thoughts about that? Because we have a window that's open. Previously, the talk was that the BBI is closed, the train left the station, the reggae movement had won, and there was nothing you could do about it. But now it seems there's space. So how does civil society organize and ensure that even the recommendations that you're making from this meeting and maybe other meetings that are also happening, because civil society is quite big in Kenya, there are like maybe 10,000 plus different NGOs and other civil society types working within this space.
Yeah, let me just attempt it. I think we should try multiple strategies. I think wherever we are and whatever spaces we get to, we need to ensure that there are certain things that we are pushing for the women of this country. So for instance, the Center for Rights Education, the organization I work for, is a member of a group called Common Women's Agenda. And within this Common Women Agenda, we've already been given space by the BBI to make some proposals, proposals to what we think the BBI should address. And one of the proposals that we are making is in regards to the National Assembly, as I've mentioned, and as also Rose highlighted, that we seem to be having a problem there. So we are trying to ensure that the 70 added number not only solves issues of Article 81D, which is on density, but also tries and address issues of Article 81B, which now is on gender. So what we are saying is that the list, because that election will be now on a proportional list, is that that list should be a zebra list. So if the first person is a man, the second person should be a woman. And they should also ensure of those additional 300 seats that they are, that people will be contesting, that there is a way that political parties ensure or find ways in which to ensure that women are also elected, so that we only get to the additional seats, not really to solve the problem of gender, but just to ensure that, we buttress that and, improve on inclusivity. So that's a proposal that we are trying to see whether they can take. There's also the proposal to ensure that the executive meets the 2/3 requirement. And then the Senate, I think the Senate, we are happy with it the way it is. We, electing one woman, one man is good. So for me, I think the question there is that how do we ensure that these proposals that we are trying to suggest actually find their way in the document? And I think that's also the question that I raised. How do we ensure that? And I do not think of any other way than of us coming together, and all of us actors, civil society actors, those working on youth, those working on persons with disability, on women's rights issues, on devolution, on governance, all of us coming together and speaking in one voice. And for just to know, we know some amongst us, we are some people are saying that we need not to compromise on our constitution of Kenya, but it will be important for us to understand when is a compromise necessary, when is that compromise a sellout, and how then do we as actors know the difference between compromising and selling out on our ideals? So we need, we cannot know these things if we do not talk together, if we do not enhance our perspective. We keep, we speak in one voice. We do not have those, working on devolution and governance saying we are not engaging. Those working on women's rights saying we are engaging. We say if we are engaging, these are our irreducible minimums. And if you do not, then because the political class, the only language they understand is political, we ensure that we establish a political cost to our exclusion. So if they exclude us, what is the price they will have to pay? I think we need that. I think that's where the solution lies.
Okay, thank you very much, Mercy. Malasen, Hamida Twahir, do you want to ask your question? I like it. On the gender parity, who is it left to? And how do we hold people?
Okay. Good morning. Okay, my question is actually on the issue of gender parity that has been actually left to the political parties through the party list. And okay, well, the proportional representation is good, but within the political party, we know how political parties operate. And now, within the BBI, there is no non-compliance in consequences for non-compliance. That means if at all a particular party decides that it will not comply with whatever is actually taking place, what is going to happen?
Yeah, thank you. And even right now, I think with the 2/3 thing, the president should dissolve parliament if we can't meet it. But it doesn't seem to be happening, neither will it be happening soon. So how do we ensure that there are strong mechanisms that enable something to happen for non-compliance? Rose, Mercy?
I think, even Mercy insinuated this, that the struggle for us on the 2/3 gender requirement has to continue. Yeah, that whatever gains that we are seeing within the BBI should not actually blind us to the 2/3 requirement. And we have to continue agitating for this. We have to continue fighting to ensure that all, not only just the political parties, but all the political fronts, all the leadership positions that we have in this country have to comply with the 2/3 requirement. And we should not let go of that requirement, regardless of what we are being told within the BBI and even within Parliament. We have to keep fighting this good fight, because for us, even with SDGs and looking at all those SDG targets, the only way that we'll actually be able to meet those targets, the only way that we are actually going to be able to fully implement SDG 5 in Kenya is through the 2/3 gender requirement, and ensuring that resources, we have to continue this fight about resources being allocated to the various institutions that are dealing with gender issues. Then the other thing is capacity. We need to have capacity both at the county level as well as the national level. We see mainly at the county level, especially within the gender directorate, the gender department, that the capacity is lacking. They tend to just allocate that position to just anybody. And we need to begin saying, no, we need to have people who understand gender. And if they don't understand gender, then there is a need to ensure that their capacity is built so that they can begin understanding gender even all the way to the counties.
Fantastic. Okay, Bonaventure Ndubi, you have some thoughts or question?
Thank you. My concern is about the national government. Yes, not national government, the National Assembly. With the Senate, of course, they brought in the issue of 50-50. But now with the National Assembly, I don't see why we should just leave it for nomination. We understand the power or the influence of nominated members of parliament as compared to elected. How can we say that also in the National Assembly, we also have equality in terms of elected members, not necessarily that they are nominated? Thank you.
Okay, really a nice question. Yeah. So how do you ensure that we get that equality through proper political representation elected in the National Assembly?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because this country has a history of not electing women. So we cannot, so pretend that, the BBI will be able to solve that problem. I think that is the realization that we need to come to.
But there's also a comment that has come from Willis about, Willis, do you want to, to talk, because it was in reference to what we were discussing earlier before we went into the political representation.
Yeah, I want to agree with all the speakers, and I think as actors in the room, it's very critical and imperative that things won't come on a silver platter. So we have to be a thorn in the flesh always, and ensure that we push both vertical, both at all levels, and even within the equal level within our operations from the ground at the household level. So moving up, even up to the presidency, the topmost hierarchy that we believe or we want. So it's something that we need to come up, all of us, and demand and push, and even if it means going on the streets, so that we ensure these things again are mainstreamed in all levels of governance, all levels of every endeavor that we try to do, so that it becomes as a mainstreaming issue that has to be factored in each and every level of our engagement. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Eva Komba?
It's not Eva, but Ken. I would like to.
Okay, Ken. Oh, you're using Eva's connection. Okay.
Yeah, we are in the office.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I would like to add to this and say that let's not also forget that part of what the BBI proposes is to have ministers elected from outside parliament, and that this particular group of ministers then become ex officio members. I think in the way Marcy has spoken with regards to being able to, they have a window of opportunity to engage with BBI. I think this is one area they could as well see if they can push the envelope with regards to women representation and sort of like ring fence some of these positions, such that when we see the next proposal from BBI, it would be that even in the selection of ministers from outside parliament, that perhaps there will be some parity or the two-thirds gender rule will apply.
Okay, thank you. Something I'm still struggling with is around women economic empowerment. How does BBI address that? What are the avenues, and how is that different from what we have in the current constitution? And these are questions to Rose, Marcy, or any other gender experts in the room.
So I think one of the things that we are seeing with the issue of women economic empowerment, within the BBI, and Ken will either support this or not, is that there, we don't feel that we are actually gaining much. And that's why we are talking about ring-fencing already what we have, like the various women economic funds. Because if one of the things we are saying now, if that we are putting women in the Senate, but where does resource discussions happen? It happens at the assembly. So if we don't have enough women at the National Assembly to actually be able to join the various resource allocation committees, which currently they are doing, what does that then mean? Then the second thing is we talked about also the women rep. Currently, the woman rep usually has the women fund, that is allocated to the women rep. If we are not going to have women rep positions as it was before, then that means again that is a loss when it comes to economic empowerment of women. So there are many things that we are seeing that, when it comes to economic empowerment of women, we might end up losing on. However, one of the things then we need to really advocate for is this budget allocation that is going to happen at the ward county, at the county increase of the budget from 15 to 30%. Could we now also advocate that within that percentage, a certain percent actually is set aside for women, because that is not well articulated within the BBI. So if we're going to have, first of all, we've said, yes, we need to ring fence and ensure that the current funds that we have for women will continue and that we are not going to lose out on them. But if we are also going to increase allocations at the county level, we need to ensure that a certain percentage is actually put towards the gender budget.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Janet Kiriso, do you want to ask your question? I like it. So how will we ensure that women from minority and marginalized communities advance, since women from majority communities seem to always get ahead, or are the ones who are presented for opportunities?
Sorry, George. I was just trying to follow up what the speaker said on the question you had raised about the gains BBI is proposing on the economic empowerment of women. And I was just following up on the presentations that we had earlier on. And then like a proposal on what we are seeing on shared prosperity and following up on the Article 43 of the Kenya Constitution on the economical rights, I think BBI again proposes here an avenue for women empowerment and looking at even the increase of allocation towards county from 15 to 35%. And now we have to play a keen eye on if these resources will be able to maybe to be pumped into some of the things that will be able to uplift the economic standards of people within even the marginalized societies, the women and the soul. So I think there are some good strides. So what we need to do is just to keep a clean watch and try to advocate for these resources to incorporate issues that will be able to uplift the living standards of women or the economic empowerment of women within our societies. So just looking at even devolution and shared prosperity, I think these are good gains that will be able to speak to economic empowerment of women within our society. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Kevin, I don't know if you want maybe to just highlight some of the things that you've been capturing, and then we can maybe try to agree on them before we go back to the plenary, because you have about 15 minutes, if I'm not wrong.
Hi, George. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll just go through, I'll scan through a little bit further. So the first issues that were floated as some of the challenges were the structural incapacity, And this was referenced in the two-tier agenda and how the BBI proposals are going to address them. So you also had the issues with the representation. Then the aspect of the revenue allocation, if it improved from 15 to 35 of 30, as the BBI seems to propose, how will this then create livelihood opportunities for women? And the other aspects were, in as much as there's a gender department, but the capacity of the human resource is not well, so that has to be built to ensure that there is meaningful engagement. And there's also a proportion that BBI proposal is gearing towards having sexual and gender-based violence as an aggravated assault. So that one is a plus compared to the existing framework. There have been quite a number of challenges, for instance, in terms of corruption and wastage. And the issue is lack of national ethos. BBI seems to be silent on that, whereas Constitution has a wide spectrum of issues to address that. So there has to be civic education to ensure that citizens are also proactive in this process. And in terms of representation of seats, Senate, BBI proposes there'll be a 50-50, whereas in the National Assembly seems to be silent on that, whereas resource allocation discourses to take place in the National Assembly. So there has to be a provision on how that can be rectified as well. In terms of reflections, there have been mentioned gains and losses. And now the issue is for the CSOs to come together through a concerted effort and then identify what are the gains, what are the losses, what we need to give up in order to gain. So those are the things that have been highlighted. And the other aspects were on empowerment, women empowerment. Yeah, see whether the increased allocation will be able to help women in other marginalized groups in marginalized areas across the entire society in Kenya.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, fine. So are there other things that you want to add to that list that Kevin has shared with us that you feel are important? Like, for instance, for me, I think there's a bit about the political parties and how they will present some lists with women, but yeah, it's not very clear whether these women will ever be elected. I think that's an interesting one because of the issues that Mercy had raised, that traditionally Kenyans are known not to favor women in the ballot box. So are there things that can be done so that maybe similar to what was happening with the Senate, which is very clear, is there another way that could be used? Okay. Maybe also strengthening the National Gender and Equality Commission, because I think the BBI still keeps it as an independent body, which is a big plus, but there are still issues around just, yeah, them really doing their function and ensuring that, yeah, they respect their mandate and are able to truly represent the interests of different marginalized groups who are covered under the framework that established the National Gender and Equality Commission. Okay, so anyone else?
George,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also one of the issues when we were doing, as a forum, when we were doing this analysis, one of the other issues that we were looking at is the issue of other marginalized groups, like we have said, persons are living with disabilities, also to an extent, the youth and those who are most left behind. And we feel that the BBI is not really capturing them well within, you know, within the various areas. So specifically, we also want to recommend that especially persons living with disabilities really need to be captured within this report, and the gains, because what we are seeing, like we're seeing all those positions that were there, the special seats that were there are going to be removed, then what are they gaining? And this needs to be captured well in the report.
Thank you very much for that point, because, I mean, yes, women are gaining, but what happens with persons with disabilities or youth? What about them? Is it just the framework for the economic empowerment? But what happens with the political representation side, which is quite silent, and representation in other bodies, even maybe boards of government, parastatals, or other authorities or commissions that are formed? Cool. Okay. Bonaventure, I can see your hand is up. Is it from before or it's a new hand? Maybe you could lower it if it's not a new hand.
It is a new hand, sorry.
It's a new hand, okay.
Yes.
Then let's see it.
When you are addressing the issue of economic empowerment, someone had raised an issue of if we can be lobbying at the county level, also to include the issue of genders at the county level, because of the word fact that is coming. But me, this would be my suggestion. For example, we have been dealing with the issue of SGBV policy in respective counties, each county to have an SGBV policy. And we are really getting it tough. For example, Busia, we are pushing it and we are at drafting point. So if we leave it to be done at the county level, and maybe we leave the CSOs at the county level to implement that policy of maybe including gender at county level in terms of economic empowerment, it's going to be hard. I would propose that we can do it at national level so that it drops down to the counties. The counties are just given that document, for example, that there's a gender parity or gender equality in terms of distribution of offices or distribution of positions in the county. But if we leave for respective counties to be doing on their own, it's really going to be tough for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and I mean, along that line, I would still also go to what Rosa had mentioned earlier about looking beyond maybe women representation and also just thinking about other groups too, that through the Constitution of Kenya 2010 had gotten a really nice platform, but it seems like that's being taken away. So how do we ensure that that remains? Let's hear from Ken or Eva, whoever is there now.
Before maybe Ken comes in, what I wanted to say is that the president was clear from the time the SDGs began being implemented in Kenya, that the implementation of sustainable goals have to happen at the county level. And we have seen at the county level, the county development plans trying to mainstream the goals within all the 17 goals within their county development plans. One of the things that needs to happen a lot is monitoring how these development plans are actually being implemented vis-a-vis whether the SDGs targets are actually fully taken care of within those plans. Because if that could happen, and in some counties you find that it's happening. Currently, as we know, George, that we are working with the Makueni County, and the governor has really been supportive in ensuring that we work with him to actually mainstream all the goals into their CIDPs. So as long as we can ensure that the SDGs, and even specifically Goal 5 is actually mainstreamed in the CIDPs, then it goes a long way towards having some gains, both economic empowerment for women as well as other gains for women.
Okay, so a clear framework for mainstreaming SDGs into county plans. Okay, thank you.
Okay, George, just to add on to what can be done to ensure that parties are really like going to take care of this other group. I think one of the key things lies with funding, and I think BBI has not really canvassed that issue. Political party funding should perhaps be tied to the people that are represented within the party. Do they reflect the face of Kenya with, say, for instance, how many women do they have? How many persons with disability do they have? How many youth do they have? So that we have sort of like a graduating system whereby to unlock the next level of funding, then you need to demonstrate that you're able to, your party has been able to do a particular thing that then furthers the interest of women, youth, and political and persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good point. Willie says that let us not forget ensuring gender inclusivity and mainstreaming in both national and county policy formulation. Great point, yeah. And yeah, that's paramount in increasing equality. Anything else that we have to add? We have 3 minutes before this session expires. Okay, there are a couple of people we've not heard from. Julia Chege, Lilian Danu. You're all happy. John Silishta.
Hi, everyone. I put my comment. This is Julia Chege.
Yeah.
I put my comment on the chat because the BBI conversation and the gender inclusion is an issue that as women, we feel there is a lot of being taken loud in circles. And for me, I focus on the executive. Like if you watched what Giru said at the Bombers, that is very, it was taken like she was joking, but then that is what the women of Kenya feels. The executive should include women, because if they create positions that like they have taken the 47 women at the Senate, where there is no budget allocation, there is no registration.
No real power.
we are just being taken loud in circles. So I am just zeroing in down on that one issue. The executive should have a woman.
Okay, fantastic. So that's a clear recommendation that we can make, that, yeah, the executive also needs to have representation that shows the true face of Kenya, and also is inclusive from a gender perspective and other elements of inclusion. Okay. Okay, if not, then I don't know if there's anybody with a burning last comment. We have less than a minute, maybe a minute. Okay, thank you.
Maybe I asked one, a quick one. There's a book that we have been working on it, and it was launched the other day at the Gender Sector Working Group, Leadership and Decision Making, Expanding Women Leadership Territories, a Guide to Women Leadership. It's a model that I would recommend that we can circulate amongst ourselves, and then we can emulate a few leadership models, because you see, like the 2-3 gender rule, every time it fails, most of the things about women, they just fail. So we want to look at the women who have been successful and see what leadership model.
Okay, I'll have to interrupt you, Julia. Okay, so thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for being in this session. Thank you. Kevin, I believe you'll be representing us. Thank you, Rose, for your presentation. Thank you, Mercy, also for adding, and also Ken for doing this research. Thank you. Let's get back to the other session, the main session. And let's also, yeah, you can share with us maybe on the chat the links to this book, Julia, that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, cool.